Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down by music theory. As we continue our deep dive into what we think is the best game music from each year, it's finally time to count down our top 10 game soundtracks of 2018. It's an interesting list that we've had pulled together for quite a while, actually. And as we record it now, we realize that we've covered each of these games in the top 10 already on our show, except for one.
Yeah, so if you missed our Best of 2019, which we did at the end of the year in 2019, which feels like it was simultaneously 600 years ago and last week, this will not be a lot of discussion about the soundtracks. Half because that's not really what this type of bonus track is for, but half because we're going to tell you the episodes you can go to get discussion for all of these soundtracks, almost, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we kind of pulled these together by coming up with our own personal top 10 lists and then merging them together in a strategic way that had the most commonality to it. So you're certainly welcome to leave your own top 10 list in comments or social media posts or whatever. We're at Soundchat OST on social media. But just want to let you know, this is the combination of our efforts. We'll give you 5 tracks that we think, best exemplifies the soundtrack for each of the top 10 here. And then before number 1, between number 2 and number 1, we'll go through our honorable mentions. And each of those games will have 1 track associated with them.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I guess we should just jump right into it. It's been a while since we did one of these.
Yeah.
Like Peter said, we have had this list basically made for months and just have not had a chance to sit down and record it. So, number 10 on our list is Yakuza Kiwami 2. This was a soundtrack composed by Hidenori Shoji, among others. We talked about this game on episode 43, and our top 5 for this game goes as such. Number 1, Outlaw's Lullaby. From there, we're going to get into some boss fight music, the first one being Rebellious Phase. Number 3, you have my personal favorite on the soundtrack being Bad Fortune Flower. Past there, the deviation from the Critical 5 that we had on the original episode, because number 4 in the original episode is not actually in Kiwami 2 at all. It is only in the original Yakuza 2, so I replaced it with Break Off. And last but absolutely not least, you have the final boss theme, A Scattered Moment.
Yakuza Kiwami 2 I still have yet to get to. I really enjoyed 0, what I got through of 0, but then it's recommended you go from 0 to Kiwami 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6. So, one I have not played yet, but really enjoy Hidenori Shoji and his music and the music that the Yakuza team pulls together. It has such an iconic sound to it, I think. That's something where it just stands out, and it's like, yeah, that's Yakuza, all right. And so Kiwami 2 was a good fit for 2018 here.
Everybody should play more Yakuza. Everybody go play all of Yakuza. 0 and Kiwami are on Game Pass, and you can go play those right now. Kiwami 2 is on Game Pass now.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on consoles, it's not on PC yet. Or it is on PC, but not on PC Game Pass. You get what I mean. Go play it, and hopefully 3, 4, 5, and 6 show up on PC at some point too.
Yeah. Number 9 on the best of 2018 is Astrobot Rescue Mission, a soundtrack composed by Kenneth Young. We talked about this pretty recently in episode 78 of Original Soundchat. Number 1 on the list is 12 Bar Bot. Up next, we're going to go into some Crystal Caves with Tight Mites. The boss theme of the game is best exemplified with the next track, that is, Bite It. Following that on the list is Disco Tree. And then we'll wrap up with the credits theme. I am Astrobot.
This game still surprises me with how good its soundtrack is, despite the fact that I don't know if I'm ever going to get to play it, because I can't picture myself buying a PSVR at any point. Maybe one of these days, if I'm like visiting you or something, I can strong arm you into letting me use your PSVR.
Yeah, there you go. It's not that long of a game, like maybe 4 hours or so, but yeah, for it being a PlayStation VR exclusive, it's not surprising if too many people haven't heard of it, but wow, it's a heck of a soundtrack. I think absolutely deserving of a top 10 placement here.
From there, it's time for me to flex my Dragon Ball muscles, because number 8 on our top 10 is Dragon Ball FighterZ. This soundtrack was composed by Toshiyuki Kishi et al. This was talked about last year on episode 27 alongside Street Fighter V. Starting our Critical 5 for Dragon Ball FighterZ, it is West City Stage. From there, you got my boy, my beautiful, beautiful boy. It's the theme of Vegeta. And then you go into my boy's boy. It's the theme of Trunks. And then you get into my boy's God. It's the most interesting song on the soundtrack, I think, being the theme of Beerus. And lastly, another one of the most interesting songs on the soundtrack, I think, completely different from everything before it. You have the theme of Hit.
Completely remarkable how well Arc System Works tried to encapsulate what the Dragon Ball universe looks like in animation, recreating manga panels. They did such a great job with it, but you can't forget how much this soundtrack rules. It's so good and just so energetic and fits a Dragon Ball fighting game perfectly.
Yeah, I love the soundtrack. It's super, super good.
Number 7 on the best of 2018, we have Marvel's Spider-Man. It's interesting to note how in different PlayStation 4 exclusive, countdowns as we're kind of wrapping up this generation, how a lot of people are like, yeah, Marvel's Spider-Man, one of the best games in this generation on PS4 as an exclusive there. The soundtrack composed by John Paisano. And we talked about the game in episode 25 of Original Soundchat. So when it comes to the 5 tracks here, the first one we got to talk about, Spider-Man. Following that is a boss battle. Shocking turn of events. The third one takes a little bit of a riff on Spider-Man's theme, but in a different way. This is City of Hope. Then we're battling Mr. Negative. This is The Demon He Became. All culminating into that final boss battle of destroying your own creation.
I would heavily agree with this is one of the best games of the generation. Spider-Man was awesome. I'm so excited for the sequel. I'm also very excited for the Miles Morales game that is coming out alongside PS5. It is honestly the closest they've gotten to getting me to say, like, maybe I will buy a PS5 at launch. I probably won't because money, but Miles Morales is looking great. And just this game was so good.
And John Paisano did such an amazing job of capturing what a Marvel game should sound like. It's this sound precisely. And he nailed it. The team nailed it. Insomniac did amazing work. And I think Paisano's back for that Miles Morales soundtrack.
That's good to hear because, yeah, I agree. He did a fantastic job. I've been using The Demon He Became as a creative inspiration for something for a while in particular. So yeah, 100%. From there, this is the only game that we haven't actually talked about on the show because we save games in this series for our year anniversaries. And we've only had one of those despite the feelings in my brain. So we've only talked about one of them, but it is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which, Hideki Sakamoto and 5 million other people.
Masahiro Sakurai's crazy team. But Sakamoto did the main theme of the game, some of the menu themes. So I guess he's credited as like the main composer of new music. And I think it's also important to note, like, people are like, why is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate at number 6? And let's highlight that for a bit. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the most impressive soundtrack overall, far and away on this list. However, that is a compilation of multiple games building on huge Nintendo libraries of music. When you look at the new music created for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, great stuff, better soundtracks higher up the list.
Yeah, it's the fact that it's mostly remixes that it sort of, as good as the remixes might be, it sort of brings it down in the rankings slightly. Still a great soundtrack. And like, it has some pretty good original music. Case in point, our first track, Menu. But then we get into some remixes. Our first of which being number 2, Gangplank Galleon. Ooh, boy, that Ace work is some good stuff. Woo! From there, you have, from Castlevania Rondo of Blood, Divine Bloodlines. And then number 4, coming from the most unlikely of places ever, from a style-savvy game, you have Ring Dong Dang.
Everybody ring dong dang, 마요와주 짱짱 아, 눈에 너 헛거리 가자시대, hey.
Song is surprisingly a jam. And then we get into yet another original track. That is the boss fight against Galim. It is Battle Against Light. Smash Bros. Ultimate is just so good.
Yeah, what an amazing entry from 2018. Continuing on with the downloadable content, still going today. But yeah, it's absolutely the point that there's great stuff, but you can't really give it points when it's talking about all the Nintendo games years past, all the Smash Brothers games adding to its soundtrack. It's a monster soundtrack, but you can't just give it number 1 based on that alone.
Yeah, and I will talk more about it when we get to this will be our 3rd anniversary episode if we make it that far. See us stopping anytime soon. This show is fun. I like doing this show, so I don't plan on stopping before then.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows? So we'll get more into it then. There are a lot of tracks that I wish could be on that list, but you only get 5. So
yeah, it's definitely tough there. Number 5 on the best of 2018. This is Octopath Traveler. Silly name aside, we talked about this on episode 72 of the show, so pretty recently. as far as this time of recording, and it was a soundtrack composed by Yasunori Nishiki. When it comes to Octopath Traveler, we have to start with main theme. Following that, one of the character themes. This is Primrose the Dancer. And then it's the main battle theme. This is Battle 1. But then we get into big boss battles, getting closer to endgame. This is They Who Govern Reason. Ultimately, the final boss battle, Daughter of the Dark God.
I'd say one day I'll play Octopath Traveler, but I really don't think I will.
Yeah, I tried it, and as we talked about on the show, like, didn't care for it for a variety of reasons. The HD 2D thing is pretty good, you know, trying to bring back classic JRPGs, but this soundtrack is incredible. Nishiki did an amazing job, I think, coming out of, I think it was like one of his earlier, or if not first, works to himself, and he crushed it. The orchestration is incredible, and it really gives you some great pieces. Like, Daughter of the Dark God, that last one with that opera voice, that's something special. That's some great performances captured.
And as we said several times during that episode, give them a remake of Final Fantasy VI.
Oh, yes, 100%.
So, number 4 on our list is Tetris Effect, which was composed by Hidelic, or Noboru Muto, as well as Takako Ishida. We talked about Tetris Effect on episode 52. Peter brought that one to the table. The top 5 for this is honestly pretty easy, despite the fact that the whole soundtrack is great, with the first one being the music for The Deep, Connected, Yours Forever.
Every passing day, the winds might grow stronger. Joy to light the way, to keep the reminder that I'm yours forever. There is no end in sight for us, nothing could measure the kind of strength inside our hearts. It's all connected. We're all together in this love, don't you forget it. We're all connected in this. I'm yours forever. There is no end in sight for us, nothing could measure.
From there, we have the music for Ritual Passion, Flames.
അരളുകരളുമായി മനസ്സുമായാടി പാടിച്ചേർന്നല്ലോ 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 അരളുകരളുമായി മനസ്സുമായാടി പാടിച്ചേർന്നല്ലോ.
After that, the music for Downtown Jazz, City Lights. Following that, the music for Celebration, All Nations. And lastly, the music for the level Metamorphosis. It is Always Been, but Never Dreamed.
What could you be afraid of if I'm right here with you? You know everything will change. Show me what you are made of, 'cause I'm always with you. Come on, we could leave today. Come follow me, come follow me. Come follow me, come follow me. Come follow me, come follow me.
As Tetris Effect continues to be remixed and made anew with an Xbox exclusive with Connected and things like this. It just makes you realize what a special game this is. Not it's Tetris. I mean, one of the simplest but most pure and best, video games of all time, but brought into this Mizuguchi vision of putting these visuals and this music with Tetris and just making it a really uplifting, thoughtful, and just a euphoric experience, honestly.
Mm-hmm. I should get back to it one of these days and try to beat it, but I'm so bad at Tetris. It's so fast.
It takes practice, that's for sure. But I remember getting into it, and I've had hardly ever committed myself to playing Tetris before. But yeah, with enough practice, I really got to appreciate it. Really gained some skill, and it was absolutely worth it. Really loved it. Wow, how do we get into the top 3? Really tough to pick. But number 3 for the best of 2018 is The Messenger, composed by Eric W. Brown, aka Rainbow Dragon Eyes. This is a game that we talked about on episode 14 of Original Soundchat. The indie darling from 2018 where you're going back and forth between an 8 and 16-bit world, and so the music reflects that with NES and Genesis-like sounding tracks that are this intense dance pop. It's a really, really cool sound to it. Love the soundtrack so much. Let's start with the first pair of tracks, Hills of Destiny and Hills of Intent. See, you hear the switch there. That happens at any time, and it's seamless. It's so cool. The second pair is Bamboo Boogaloo and Bamboo Boogaloo 2. Then we get to the Glacial Peak. This is the Frozen Light and the Frozen Dark. But then you get the boss at that key narrative moment in the halfway point, so to speak, of the story. So this is the one track. This is the Arcane Golem. And finally, the last level of the game. This is To Break the Curse and a melody to break the curse.
I still gotta play this game. It's sitting installed on my Switch right now. It's actually been installed since shortly after we recorded this episode. And I just haven't gotten to it yet. But it's definitely on my list. I listen to Bamboo Boogaloo quite often on the Spotify playlists. That is very often the song that I go hunt down to start my listening with. So
That's really good to know. Yeah, it's an incredible soundtrack. One that I find myself listening to, and one that when we edited it back in the day, and to do that switch, try to simulate it as best as possible. Super cool to hear the differences between the two soundtracks. Wow, what a game. The DLC I found to be very difficult. I got like most of the way through that, didn't beat it, but the game itself, wow, fantastic.
From there, for number 2, this is my personal favorite soundtrack of this year of 2018. But, like, I'm not going to argue that both number 2 and number 1, largely interchangeable, I think. Very, very good. But this one narrowly beats it out for me. And that is Celeste by Lena Raine. We talked about this back in episode 29. You can hear me getting real emotional about it in that episode if you would like. I absolutely adore this soundtrack. Starting with the first track, First Steps. From there, we have one of the first moments of intensity on the soundtrack being Resurrections. After that, you have what I think is one of the more underrated songs on the soundtrack being Scattered and Lost. The game comes to a bit of a climax when you hear the song That is our fourth track, Confronting Myself. And then, of course, my absolute favorite song in the game, and one of my favorite video game songs of all time, it is Reach for the Summit.
Yeah, Lana Rain did an amazing job with this soundtrack. Really put herself on the map with this soundtrack, but also what a year for indies in 2018. Celeste was a groundbreaking game.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic game, fantastic soundtrack. Just, Celeste means a lot to me in general, and if you want to hear why, you should go listen to episode 29 of the podcast. What was the game that was alongside Celeste? I don't remember.
It was Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception.
Ah, right, because climbing.
Yes, there you go. That's exactly what it was. Well, let's go through real quick. Number 10, we talked about Yakuza Kiwami 2. Number 9, Astrobot Rescue Mission. Number 8, Dragon Ball Fighters. Number 7, Marvel's Spider-Man. Number 6, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Number 5, Octopath Traveler. Number 4, Tetris Effect. Number 3, The Messenger. And number 2, Celeste. But before we get to number 1, let's talk about some honorable mentions. We list these games in alphabetical order, and we're only highlighting one track for each of them, but these were close to making the list, and we figured for one reason or the other, they at least deserve a mention among the best soundtracks of 2018. Starting with A Way Out, the soundtrack composed by Sam Hulick and Gustav Grefberg, and they composed this piece that we'll highlight. It's Farewell.
A Way Out was a very interesting game, and hopefully a lot of these games, I'm hoping, if we haven't talked about them already, eventually we'll probably talk about them on the show at some point.
Yeah, a neat little local co-op multiplayer experience. Definitely one to check out. I played with my brother, and it was a great experience.
I played with my roommate. It was very fun. From there, our next honorable mention is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, soundtrack by The Flight, aka Joe Henson, as well as Alexis Smith and others. And the song that we are highlighting from Assassin's Creed Odyssey is Legend of the Eagle Bearer.
I love Assassin's Creed Odyssey. One of my favorite games of 2018 for sure. This is a song that really stands out on the soundtrack, but I don't think the rest of the soundtrack gets a whole lot of big moments, and so I don't know if I'd put it in a top 10 here, but this is a great one, composed by The Flight for sure. Next up is Deltarune. Deltarune soundtrack composed by Toby Fox, yes, of Undertale fame, and he composed Field of Hopes and Dreams. What a delightfully catchy piece that is. Holy cow.
One of these days I'll play Deltarune. I still have to. I haven't touched it yet. And I probably should, honestly. From there, our next honorable mention is for Detroit Become Human, which was composed by Philip Shepard, John Pisano. Hey, that's familiar. And Nima Fakrara. Our track that we are highlighting for this game is Connor Main Theme by Nima Fakrara.
Say what you will about a David Cage game. A really interesting soundtrack where you have the three main protagonists, and each of their music cues are composed by separate composers. So you have Philip Shepard for Kara, you have John Pisano for Marcus, and Nima Fakrara for Connor. And it's a different mishmash based on the different qualities of the characters, but I think it works really well. It's just one of the more interesting things about that soundtrack.
Yeah, I think it's a really neat approach to a game like that, actually, because I'm not Detroit Become Human's biggest fan. I think that game has some problems, but the soundtrack is definitely still very good, regardless.
Up next is Florence, soundtrack composed by Kevin Penkin. We talked about this one, we've talked about it on the show, on episode 26 of Original Soundchat. I think it's appropriate to highlight Kevin Penkin's Florence.
I love this soundtrack so much. This is one of my, processing feelings, processing emotions, processing stuff like that soundtracks. I'll just put it on. I'll listen to the whole thing from start to finish. I'll play this game all the time to do the same thing. Just, this soundtrack is great. It's probably, of my choices, this is probably the closest to almost hitting this list.
Yeah.
That there is in the honorable mentions. It's such a good soundtrack. It's so good.
Yeah, really, really close to making it, for sure. Great soundtrack, great game.
That's one of my favorite episodes that we have done. We did Florence alongside Fire Emblem Awakening, which, very weird pairing, but I think it worked out because I think that whole episode, just in general, is one of my favorites that we've done in general. From there, we have the soundtrack to Gris. That's Gris. It was composed by Berlinist. And the song that I want to highlight for this is Gris Part 1. Gris is this like very gorgeous sort of puzzle platformer sort of thing. I think it's good, and I do genuinely recommend people check it out. The soundtrack is gorgeous, and one of these days I will probably bring this game to the show just to talk about it. But, oh man, it's a very pretty game. I don't think it's top 10 soundtracks of the year material, but I definitely did want to give it a shout out.
Yeah, I got it on Steam. I really got to get around to it. I don't think it's that long of a game. But yeah, gorgeous. Gorgeous for sure. We've talked about Minute on Original Soundchat before. Yukio Kallio's work was highlighted in episode 48 of the show. And yeah, we definitely have to bring up the track Minute's Awakening.
By far the standout track of this soundtrack. 100%.
Oh yeah, if you want a cute little game that kind of riffs on top-down 2D Legend of Zelda games, but you die every minute and keep your big item progress, great game. Really, really catchy soundtrack. Oh my goodness.
From there, our next honorable mention is Monster Hunter World, composed by Akihiko Narita, among others. And the song that we are going to highlight is The Invading Tyrant, Betelgeuse. Probably pronounced that monster's name wrong.
I think you probably got it right.
I've never played a Monster Hunter game.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that Akihiko Narita, we highlighted his work on Tatsunoko vs. Capcom for the show. And then we mentioned, like, he did quite a lot of work for Monster Hunter World. And then you hear it, it's like, oh, this is really good stuff. Big fan.
One day, maybe I will play a Monster Hunter game, but probably not, because multiplayer is exhausting. That's the whole thing. Multiplayer is exhausting. Monster Hunter sounds exhausting, but all of my friends are into it. All of our mutual friends are into Monster Hunter. So
yeah, we might get some comments on why this wasn't there, but I think it's just a lack of understanding about the full soundtrack, to be honest.
Probably.
Interesting pair of games here, because they're both dancing games from one of our favorite series. Couple spin-offs that happened in 2018, late 2018 for North American releases. This is Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight, with composers of Ryota Kozuka, Shoji Meguro, and Atsushi Kitajo. It's interesting with this and then the other dancing game where it's a whole bunch of remixes from Persona 3 and Persona 5. So to highlight those soundtracks, we're actually going to pick the opening numbers, the opening themes that play with the opening movie. So for Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight, this would be Our Moment, but composed by Ryota Kozuka.
We got to catch a smile and shout it in a while. So set free the mind. Remember the times how we laughed and joked around. Yeah, the soul is unbound. It's burning. No need to hold back anymore. What are you waiting for? Let it go and rock the boat. Come a little closer. Need your hand.
And from there, I think it makes sense to go straight into it. The next one is Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight. Same composer list as before. And for that, we are going to highlight the track Groovy.
Let's be on this ride. You've been waiting for us now. Here we are, and things are gonna get freaking hot and wild. So can you feel the jazz of the beautiful ballet? How
I've not played either of these games yet.
Yeah, I own them, but I haven't played them. And I really liked Persona 4 Dancing All Night. But, wow, these songs from when they played during the reveal trailers, like, they constantly stick in my head. They're so catchy, and I'm glad we get to bring them up, at least in this way, in a best of 2018 list.
Because I can't imagine that we're at any point gonna bring Dancing All Night to the show, because it's just remixes. That's all it is.
Yeah, right.
Maybe for like a bonus track of some sort where we're like, let's talk about this game that's all remixes. I don't know. I don't know. But which is a shame, because those soundtracks are fantastic. All three of these games have fantastic soundtracks. I personally didn't like playing Dancing All Night. I think its gameplay is kind of subpar, but that's just me. I know so many people that disagree with me. I know you just said you like it. Our friend Matt loves it. Our friend Luca loves it. So I'm kind of in a minority there, and I understand that.
I think one of the biggest snubs to this list, especially for those that played it, it's Red Dead Redemption 2, a soundtrack composed by Woody Jackson and others. I think chalk this one up to our lack of knowledge for it, but I think the one that stands out, at least as far as when you think of this soundtrack, it's Unshaken, composed by Daniel Lanois, Rocco DeLuca, and Michael Eugene Archer.
He who drinks from the deep water, may he know the depths of the well. Stand unshaken amidst the crash of the world. May I stand unshaken.
As much as I love the first Red Dead Redemption, 2 did not hit with me when I first played it. Found it a little bit too slow and realistic at parts, if that makes sense. Didn't translate well to games, and fell out of it pretty quickly. But that's kind of what happened when I played Red Dead Redemption for the first time, and then I came back to it years later and loved it. So maybe in a couple years from now I'll have the same sort of rationalization for myself as when I played Red Dead Redemption 2 again. But yeah, I think it's just an overall lack of knowledge. I think it's definitely at least deserving among here on the honorable mentions, but feel like this will be the one that people gripe about the most not being in the top 10.
Potentially, but it's our show. We could put the songs in the top 10 if we want. We get to decide.
And this is why you gotta comment.
Our next soundtrack to get an honorable mention is Return of the Obra Dinn, composed by Lucas Pope. We actually talked about this game recently, back on episode 75. The song that I figured was best to highlight for this one is Soldiers of the Sea.
What a cool murder mystery puzzle game. What a game. And a great soundtrack to go with it, considering Lucas Pope is not a musician, but he did a great job.
Yeah, it's a very neat soundtrack, a very neat game. If you haven't played Return of the Obra Dinn, give it some of your time. Give it like 4 hours of your time. It's fun.
Wrapping up our honorable mentions is Yakuza 6, The Song of Life, composed by a team led by Hidenori Shoji and others. And we're going to highlight the karaoke song Today is a Diamond, or Honjitsu wa Diamond, which is composed by Hid Lunch.
久々の休みだし明日は泳ぎに行こう今頃多分夢の海の中年がいなくはしゃいでボート貸し切りにして沈む夕日流
Kiryu with a ukulele will always be a blessed image in my head.
Oh, it's the screenshot of that game, for sure.
It's so good. I have my problems with Yakuza 6 and the way that it wrapped up Kiryu's story, but, I mean, it's still a pretty good game, and I hope I like Yakuza 7. I hope.
Maybe that'll appear in our best of 2020 list. But to wrap up, the best of 2018. Number 1 and number 2 fought back and forth, but had to give our number 1 spot for best of 2018 to God of War, composed by Bear McCreary, a game we highlighted in the very first episode of Original Soundchat. Boy, again, feels like forever ago, but also not that long ago.
400 years ago.
Important tracks to cover. The first one is God of War. Following that is the emotive theme of Ashes. After that, one of the best moments in games of that year, it is Echoes of an Old Life. Then we get into the final boss battle. This is Deliverance. And wrapping it up with the reveal in the final cutscene, the Summit.
Feel
I think not only one of the best games of the generation, if you really look back on it, it's a masterpiece. No moment is unwasted. The seamless camera is remarkable, but you get a consummate pro like Bear McCreary to do this score and do such a great job with it for a video game score. Not only that, but introducing a reboot to a series that was in dire need of a reboot, introducing it at E3 2016 with its score, with the live orchestra performing the God of War title track. I think it's a great representation for the best soundtrack of 2018.
I still hold Celeste just slightly above it, but I do think that it is very much, like, I'm not angry or upset that it's here because it's a very, very good soundtrack. It's one of those where, and I'll probably put a question like this on the Thanksgiving Q&A when we get there, even though this is the year it's not super necessary because Thanksgiving is probably canceled. But it's one of those soundtracks where it's like, oh, I have cutting room floor tracks now, but that was a year ago, so what's it matter?
Ooh, interesting.
Because I have played it. It's like, because my brain is broken and I have trouble like forcing myself to start games, even if I want to play the game. I'm pretty sure God of War is the only example I can think of a game that you brought to the show. And then I was like, yeah, I should go finish that. And then I did, because we were just talking about the Messenger, about how I installed the Messenger a year ago and I still haven't played it. But I did go and finish this game, and I'm very happy that I did.
And then you listen back, and all the spoilers I was trying to dance around make sense.
Pretty much. So yeah, it's also just meaningful for this show in particular to have it, like, again, like you said, this is the first episode of the show that we talked about this soundtrack.
Oof. I'm a little hesitant to go back to it and hear how much the show has changed in the almost 2 years. Wow. Crazy to think about, but yeah, that'll do it for our best of 2018 list. Always good to pull these together. I don't think it'll be too long before we turn around a 2017 list. We've already got a top 10 made. Just got to flesh out what tracks we want to highlight for honorable mentions. But yeah, we'll get that going soon. And that will do it for us on this bonus track for Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at The Debaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's the MP3 podcast version that you want over on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where you can hear Joe's other podcasts, Smasherpieces. But you can get Smasherpieces and Original Soundchat on podcast services around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever, even on Spotify. We have the Spotify podcast episode playlist, the podcast feed, but also a big playlist of if we talk about a song, even on episodes like this. If we talk about it and it's on Spotify, it's going on the big Spotify playlist. So definitely check out to hear what makes the cut. If not, what songs are already on there.
Yeah, all of the songs that could be on there from this bonus track are already on there.
But, maybe get some of the honorable mentions on there as well.
Mm.
And then again, we're going to keep making not only episodes every week, but we'll sprinkle in some bonus tracks in as well. To play us out, you kind of like to find a random song that we like throughout the year. Maybe that doesn't make a full honorable mention or something like that. I love the song Battle Torna from Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna the Golden Country. It was a standalone DLC expansion pack. And so a neat little soundtrack that, not necessarily makes the cutting room floor or the honorable mentions, so to speak, but a really cool song. I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat with this bonus track. We'll see you next time. Take care.